Let the dragon consume you! Enemy sighted. Stop the payload! Stop the payload! In 5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
And we're back. Welcome to episode 54 of the Bird Watchers. I'm your host Ryan. In this episode, we're going to go through stage 4, week 2. Still no Sigma yet. That's not going to be in this stage. But we do have roll lock, and we're getting to see teams get a little more comfortable in this space, and to see what they come up with. Not too much variance outside of what we saw the first week. We are seeing less double sniper than we did see the first week. We are still seeing Hanzo, though, on many more maps than we have in the past. A little bit less Widow. And we'll kind of get into what else we're seeing as far as if the mirror comps that are popping up. Ice fishing still there. I think that's what we're officially calling it. So we'll go with that until it clears, or if there's something else that comes up. And that's the May, Orisa, Hog, that whole shebang that you're seeing a lot of. That seems to be played by most teams. This seems to be the base. I'm not going to call it new goats. I'm tired of hearing there's already posts out there talking about new goats, coming up with, an acronym that's similar to goats. We need to put all that in the past, right? I think there's still some PTSD from that, and it's going to take a little bit of time. But yeah, things are shaking up. We're going to see a lot more characters played. We're getting to see DPS pop off, as we'll talk about soon. But let's hop straight into it, because we don't have any news. There's no games for us this week. So there's no, and when I say no games, I meant watch parties. So, Atlanta Royal Family usually does watch parties for Atlanta Reign matches. Atlanta Reign doesn't have any matches this week. That being because we are participating in the final week of the LA homestand that's happening by Kit Kat. And that's going to be a doubleheader for us. And then also we're having a doubleheader in the last week, the week before that, which is week 4. So no games this week for us, no watch party because of that. So we can hop straight into standings and start going through stuff and get ready to talk about the 2 matches we have for today. So an interesting week overall. A lot of upsets. The Pick'em, I think that's what they're calling them. League Pick'em is what they're calling it, I think. Was finally working for me this week. So you got to, and League Pick'em, if you don't know what that is when you're watching on Twitch, you have an extension that you can activate that allows you to pick as the matches go on. So you get all 4 maps and you get to choose, okay, well, what team's going to do what on certain maps. There's different criteria for each, right? So you can say, okay, who's going to win overall? You pick between the 2 teams. You can say, okay, on map 1, which support's going to have the most healing, stuff like that, right? And a lot of people got screwed over on Pick'em this week because there were a lot of upsets and a lot of turnouts that people didn't really expect. Let's hop into the standings for this week and the outcomes. So we started off with Charge versus Spitfire on Thursday, and we had Spitfire taking this 3-1. Kind of expected. Charge and Spitfire are up there as far as placing for the grand finals, the playoffs, and all that coming up soon. Then we had Mayhem and Justice. We had Justice beating Mayhem 3-2 here. So this is kind of the battle for the bottom, right? Both these teams are just kind of setting up for the next season since they have no chance of getting into playoffs. We then had Toronto Defiant against Dragons, and we had an upset here with Defiant beating Dragons. Defiant in an interesting spot right now. I think they pretty much have no chance of getting in the playoffs, or it's a very slim chance. They need a lot of things to go their way. But it does seem like they're committed to getting this mixed roster, this mixed nationality roster, not get it going, but keeping it going and getting more comfortable and having that cross communication. But they did take it 2-1 over the Dragons here. And we had Dynasty versus Valiant. This one went 5 maps, and Dynasty took it over the Valiant here, 3-2. We then go to, and now we're in Friday. We start with Paris Eternal versus New York Excelsior. New York taking it 3-1. No big surprise there. Paris is doing better, but New York is still New York. I mean, they have been dropping games here and there, but they're still top. They're going to be there. They're going to be in the playoffs, and we'll see if they show up in the playoffs, because that's the question everybody always has, right? Then we had Outlaws versus Fusion. Fusion taking it 3-1 over Outlaws here. With Outlaws' previous performance, people said, oh, 2-2-2 is the solution. It's not. Outlaws have always been inconsistent, and it's very confusing to know at what point are they doing anything and like what they're doing, what their plan is. It's anybody's guess to what Houston plans on doing week to week. But they don't look terrible, right? That play Dante, let him play Sombra. That's pretty much kind of the gist here at the moment. But yeah, Fusion taking that one 3-1. Then we have Hunters versus Gladiators. Gladiators winning this one 3-2 over the Hunters. So Hunters, obviously, they've been doing the 2-2-2 thing longer than most people throughout the GOATs situation. But Gladiators have never been a team, and I think from day one I've always said a team you should ignore, right? Because that team is well made, in my opinion. It's just it's kind of hard to pin why they have poor performances on certain weeks. And I'm not going to dig too much into that here, but I'm never doubting that they can win against anyone they play, put it that way. But they do take it here in the map 5. And then we have Saturday, where we have Spark versus Charge. Charge step up, 3-0 Spark here. So it looks like the Spark that kind of looked like they were getting their flame going fizzled out again. They're inconsistent. That's consistent. It's consistently inconsistent. Which, I'm not saying that. I'm a Lanark fan, right? So I'm not saying that maliciously. It's just that's what it is. And they did have the whole situation with Crystal recently, where he's permanently been benched. You can read about that whole situation, about his off the court antics, on the competitive Reddit site, or competitive Overwatch. I'm gonna keep saying that until I should practice saying competitive Overwatch 3 times before the show starts. But yeah, you can check it out there. People talk about it. They made an official post on Twitter. Those cultures seem to be very forward when it comes to discipline and being very open about it. So check that out. I think that may have affected their performance. I'm not sure. Then we get into the first game for Atlanta Reign this week. The one we're not talking about today, which is the 4-0 against Paris Eternals. Like I said, Paris Eternal doesn't look terrible, but Atlanta Reign is on fire. Pun intended. The thing is, like, we're performing everybody's on all cylinders. I kind of talked about the org in general just seems to be in a good place. They have it figured out. You have Atlanta Academy finishing their golden season in Contenders, not dropping a map. And then you have Atlanta kind of turning it around since the rally back in homestand, and it's just continuing forward. So hopefully we just keep this momentum. We got through the tough times for now, and now we just need to make playoffs. I'm thinking it's definitely a thing. We were in the middle of the pack, and we're slowly crawling up as we gather these last final wins. So 4-0 there against Eternal. Then we have Mayhem versus Spitfire. Mayhem 3-0 the Spitfire. So this is something that people have been talking about. Spitfire not the top team at the moment, but they have been doing a lot better with the meta shift, because they do have all these tools at their disposal. And the Mayhem has been a team that has never really impressed, right? They've gone with this whole concept of building around Saya player, and they haven't really seen the fruits of that labor. And in this game, though, they upset. It's an upset. They're the bottom 2 teams are them in Justice. So it's very surprising. People couldn't stop talking about this win here. I don't know what it means. I mean, it's 1 week, right? 1 week, and it's the second week in a new meta, or not a new meta, but like a new format situation, like a big change for the league overall. So we'll wait a couple weeks, and then we'll talk about an off season, and then when the season starts, we'll see, right? Then we have 3-1 here with Valiant versus Fuel. No surprise, Dallas Fuel just kind of petered out after homestand. They didn't really look like they were going to be contending anymore. It's just like they kind of petered out. I don't know if it's a case of the player mix up, or if there's anything going on with the org. I just think that they thought the season was over at that point. Maybe that hype didn't run long enough. I don't know. They're not a team that people kind of put up to win any match at this point, unless they're playing the bottom tier teams. Then we moved into, a California match here with the Shock versus Gladiators. This was a back and forth, and it finished in the Shock's favor, 3-2. And then we moved to Sunday with the 2 games we're going to talk about today. So we start with Atlanta Reign versus Outlaws, and that's the one we're going to talk about first on this episode. And then we moved on to Defiant versus Fusion. Fusion squeezing this one out, 3-2. I can go on and on. Fusion got 2 wins this week that they need, and I can go on and on talking about how they still don't look happy. and I don't understand why. So we'll leave it at that. Next match was the Justice versus Titans, another talked about match this week that surprised a lot of people, very surprising, and that's the one we'll talk about second. And then our final match of the week was the Hunters versus New York Excelsior, which was another upset. So I talked about the surprising outcomes of this week, and this is one of them, 4-0 against New York Excelsior. So remember, we're not in playoffs yet, where Excelsior is known to choke and known to give games up. We're still in the thick of things, and that's a siren in the background. I hope everything's all right. That's a good segue into our first match, right? Let's get straight into it. That's standings for the week, right? Very, very upsetting week for a lot of people because no one knows what to think anymore with the meta shift. But I think next week's going to be more telling. And then week 4, and I think at that point we'll see what's sticking, who's going to be having trouble to wrap this season up, and what those implications mean for Worlds possibly, and then for next season, since we did have this big shift in the final stage. But let's start off with our first match. This should be a short one. Reign versus Outlaws. So you know who my team is. There's no guessing. But it's one thing to see your team in person after they go through the struggle at homestand, to step up to the plate and to get reinvigorated, right? To start getting comfortable with this roster after the Fran leave, and to finally have a solid place to build from. To watch them do it at this speed, and to watch them transition from something, because remember, we were good in GOATs. We were very solid in GOATs. Teams, like, we were taking on the top teams in GOATs that came our way, and then we struggled and tossed a few games away, but we were considered one of the better GOATs teams. We weren't struggling. We could flex as well. And now we're in a meta where we get this 2-2-2 roll lock, where I feel from day one we were built to play in. The same can kind of be said about Outlaws, where they struggled a lot with GOATs. We saw that. But they also struggled last season when it came to like Tracer meta, is finding out, okay, we need a Tracer. And they always were like one step behind the meta and behind every other team. And this is represented in this game very well, right? And as someone who followed Outlaws, I was an Outlaws fan all last year. I was kind of disappointed by this lack of, focus or lack of pinpointing what problems were and solving them. You can kind of see here that I don't think Reign has that problem. And we'll talk about it at the end, if I remember. So we start off with Li Jiang Tower here. We start on Night Market, and this round starts with the mirror comp. We start with the Reaper, Mei, Orisa, Diva, Lucio, Moira, which you see a good bit on these control maps so far. And Reign is the first team to hit 99, and they're able to win this round due to the overall better positioning in fights and Babybay's better performance on Reaper in comparison to Linkser. Linkser does not look as good on the Reaper as Babybay does. Linkser blows a lot of ults. His positioning is off a good bit of the time. He just doesn't seem comfortable, and that's not really his bag. Remember, he's a Tracer Widow player originally, so that makes sense. So Reign take Night Market, and then we move to the next round, which is Garden. And Reign are completely dominant from the beginning in this one. So, it's a little different from the first round. And we take this round, and then we take the map. So we start off 1-0 in the series, taking Li Jiang Tower. So we're going to move on to our map of the match, which is Hanamura. So we have Enlier subbing in for Babybay. So Babybay's out. And we start with Reign on attack here. So Reign start off with Sombra Genji, which is good. You get to see Erster's Genji, right? We've seen Babybay a bit on the Sombra towards the end of last stage. And after a few attempts, Erster's Genji ensures that we get that 0.1 cap on the back of one of his 3k blades, which he follows up with another subsequent kill. And then they grind out ult advantage on 0.2, and they finally cap it right before going into overtime. So not completely terrible. We move then to Outlaws on attack, and Outlaws get a better time on 0.1 and take 0.2 on the back of a well-timed Dante Sombra EMP. That turns the fight in their favor, so this is what you want to see, right, from the Outlaw side. Put Dante on Sombra. That's his best character. He's all right on other things. His Tracer's really solid, but, he really shines here, and he's a stab. Like, when you talk about Sombra, when you used to talk about Sombra, you talked about Dante. That's how it was. So naturally, they're able to ride that wave of his performance on her through these points to do better than the Reign moving into round 2. So we go to round 2, and Reign go first, but with only a minute in the time bank, they're only able to get about one tick on point one. This is a really good back and forth, and this is the reason round two is really why I made this the map of the match compared to the rest of this series. And then Outlaws go next, and they're almost full held until the final fight, where they have a great fight initiation off of Dante's Sombra hack, which then he follows up with an EMP, which puts him in a great position to win this fight and take this map and tie up the series 1-1. So then we go to Blizzard World, right? And we step back up to the plate. We start off with Outlaws on attack here, and they struggle a bit. They struggle in part due to some poor fight positioning, and this is becoming a theme across this whole stage, to be honest, is with GOATs, yes, positioning was important, but it was like you were always together, right? Like that's the whole point of GOATs. You had to stay together. So it was like an ingrained rule that you had to stick with your team. So it was very rare that people would get caught off guard or out of position. Now that we're in roll lock, there's a lot more potential for that to happen. And because you have DPS that can pick people off, if you're out of position, you get punished a lot harder than you do in GOATs, right? In GOATs, they would just initiate because you weren't there versus just picking you off and then your team being one behind. So I got a little tangent there, but yeah. So Outlaws struggle with this positioning compared to Rain and Erster starting off engagements with Hanzo picks. So they're starting fights, with 5 people. That never works, right? That's just basic math. Erster got a Hanzo ult, this is a little stat, every minute during this attempt. So there's 4 minutes in an attempt. Boom, that's 4 ults, right? That's insane. And they're only able to get a bit more than about 1 tick on point one here. So that gives us our turn to attack. So Rain attacks here. They go next, and they're able to cap the point on the first attempt. And a note I want to make here, which I talked about in our previous one, and I like to always reference, I was always hard on FRD coming in, and I still am, but he's performing very well on Hog. And I think that's one of the main reasons he's in right now. I don't think there's any Dako controversy at the time. It's just that his Diva is good enough, and it's gotten better, and his Hog is really good in comparison to Dako's Hog of what we've seen. So I'm figuring that's why he's in, and it's working out. So yeah, Rain take this map, and we go up the series 2-1. So then we move to Route 66, which is a map that we have more success on than Outlaws, but we're kind of back and forth when it comes to this map. If it was Dorado, I'd be more confident. But we start with Rain on attack, and after breaking through the initial aggressive defense from Houston's standpoint on point one, we snowball through all the remaining points, and we cap with the third fastest time on this map in the league, which is 2 minutes and 38 seconds. So, oh yeah, and Erster has 20 plus kills, kill streak on Hanzo in this attempt. So like I said, a lot of good Hanzo play across the board this week, which is great to see because who doesn't love locking in Hanzo on ladder, right? And this just gives you the excuse to do that. Not saying you're going to perform at that level, but I think people won't harass people much now that you get to see Hanzo being played so much in the early stages of this roadblock debut. And then we move to Outlaws on attack. And Outlaws are able to get a quick point one, but they struggle on point two, and they can't really cap until overtime, not leaving much time for point three, where all advantage works in the Rain's favor, as well as the spawn, right? The spawn becomes your advantage on defense there, especially on Route 66. And you have this great Halt Blizzard combo that kind of puts a nail in the casket, because Outlaws almost won this fight, but once again, positioning, right? Positioning became key here. We went out, we put the nail in the casket, and we hold this, and we win the series. So yeah, we take it 3-1. We won both our games. So we're on a win streak right now. We've won 3 games in a row, and we have 4 games remaining. We have 2 doubleheader weekends, so it's going to be rough. One of those being a homestand, and it's going to be interesting to see if we can do this kind of perfect run into the playoffs. So that'll be a huge story for Atlanta. It would kind of be exactly what people expect from Atlanta sports, so that's one concerning thing. We get there and then we choke or whatever. I don't know. We won't speculate, but huge performance from the boys. They looked insane. Erster is insane, as he's proven that, when they picked him up and said this guy can play anything. I mean, at that point, you think about players that can play damn near anything. You thought Nevix, Shax kind of comes to mind, even though he's on the support side, or Shaz, sorry, not Shax. Although Shax does have a wide pool, which is why they brought him up, and things like that. But yeah, props to the boys. So let's move into our game of this week that I really wanted to touch on. So like I said, there were plenty of upsets, right? You had the Hunters beating Excelsior. You had the Mayhem beating London. But the biggest one that stood out was this game on Sunday, late Sunday, which was Justice versus Titans. So we're going to hop straight into it, right? So first of all, Horeg is starting. So no Somin Su, no Stitch at this time, just Horeg, which is interesting. And, Horeg's been one of those players he was in the league originally on the Spitfire. Then he was in Contenders. He dropped down to Contenders. They released him. He did well there with GC Busan. And then he came back, and it's like, okay, now he's back on his team who's performing well as well. So it's like, okay, he's kind of earned his place, and they put him in. And now is kind of the time, since Titans are already locked. I mean, they did so great the whole season. They can try some things out, especially with the questions of how are Titans going to look in 2-2-2, and they're trying to figure that out. So that's one thing to keep in note. No Somin Su, no Stitch. And we start off Ilios here on Lighthouse. And Justice, having Stratus, and you've seen Stratus. Corey's still in. You still have that roster that you came into this with. The only difference being Guido's starting now as that flex support and looking really good. But we'll get there. Lighthouse. We start with Ilios, Lighthouse, and Justice starts strong, and they maintain this dominance throughout the round, only allowing Titans to win about one fight. And one thing that stands out is, we get to see Horeg on Doomfist, but Titans look oddly scrambled and unorganized during these fights. So yes, it's not GOATs, and I mentioned that, right? Like, you're not always sticking together. But the way they're engaging, the way they're doing things seems very single-minded versus a team mindset, where the Justice looks surprisingly organized in my book. Then we move to Ruins. So Justice take Lighthouse. We move to Ruins, and Justice continue this momentum, actually winning this round 100-0 and take the map. Justice start this series 1-0. So definitely not what I expected. Control has always been better for Vancouver over Justice. I mean, you just look at the records, that shows. But we are in this roll-lock situation, and Corey and Stratus are stepping up when it comes to this DPS duo. Very, very smart plays too, moving forward. Like, skilled plays and smart plays, and I'll talk about that. We move into our next map, which is Volskaya, and we start with Justice on attack, and it takes a few engagements for Justice to actually get cap point 1, but they have more success capping point 2 on their first fight, actually, and then they finish the round with about a minute remaining. So, a pretty solid attempt. We move the Titans on attack, and Titans almost cap point 1 very quickly to start this one off. And that gives you momentum usually until Corey decides to pop off on Hanzo and steals this fight from them, getting a 3K. And this puts Titans in a spot where they're only able to cap point 1 because of all these subsequent fights they have to take in overtime. So we move to point 2, and it becomes a nightmare for the Titans since they barely get any fighting attempts because Corey keeps picking off someone as they're running back. And if they're not getting picked off, Stratus is using May's walls to essentially cut off certain approaches, so they have to reroute, and then Corey's getting picks again. It's very smart, very good to watch to kind of see that breakdown. Like, it's not just them performing insanely on those characters, it's them kind of working together as that DPS duo. Because you're used to hearing like the support duo working together, the tanks working together, off tank, your main tank, but you rarely hear about DPS playing in a way that accentuates each other, right? Like, tries to kind of like assist each other. But yeah, so Titans struggle with this, and then Titans end up getting held because of this approach. They really only get like 2 fights, and they lose those, and Justice goes up 2-0 in the series. So like I said, Justice looks extremely coordinated, and their DPS duo is clearly outplaying Horeg and Haksal here. So this takes us to our next map, which is sort of our map of the match, mainly because this is where Titans put up the most fight. You actually get a game, like an actual game here, instead of a beating. Because up to this point, it's kind of been a beating. Justice fully in control, but we're on Hollywood. And up to this, so Titans have never been down 0-2 before in this season. And this is the first time. So we start with Justice in attack. And Justice are just treating Titans like children once again. Corey isn't missing shots, and Stratus, his strategic make play is very fun to watch. So if you have Command Center through the paid plan on Twitch for the Overwatch League viewing, watch Stratus play Mei. It's very interesting because it's not just like, he's making conscious decisions. He's doing a lot of feints to get their attention, and like the way he's positioning his body is if you want to play May properly, if you want to play, because she's meant to be a zone kind of character, she's not supposed to be sniper battling widows and stuff like that. This is a great example of that, and it's very impressive because I didn't expect it from him. I don't know much about Stratus. I didn't follow him in Contenders, but it's cool to see it played here versus the other May play we've seen that's more aggressive or kind of in your face. It's very like laid back and strategic, which is my kind of play style. So I appreciate it a lot. So Justice attack, like I said, great to watch. They get a full cap. No surprise here. Titans go on attack, and it's their turn to step up, and they kind of don't. Once again, they're not able to cap point 1 until overtime, and in those situations when now you're under the gun to perform the rest of the map, it's kind of hard to do so, even though you're the Titans. But the track record this match has not shown that they'll be able to step up. We move to point 2, which goes a bit better, but there just isn't enough time to work with as they move into point 3. They get held on point 3, and Justice wins this map. So Justice are up 3-0, and technically that means they win the match. We do have one more match to go, so it's already a surprise here. We go to Havana, Justice start on attack, and this is just hard to watch, right? I almost kind of contemplated turning it off because it's just, they did a shot of the Titans and they just looked so unhappy and miserable, which is not, a team who's so used to winning. It's kind of like, hey, I wish this is a loss, but you're still the best team technically. I mean, on paper, it's a bad sign of things to come, considering this week they only had this match. I'll double check, but I'm pretty sure this was their only match this week. Yeah. And that's something that says all you had to do is maybe they didn't prepare at all. Maybe they just kind of took it with a grain of salt, said it's Justice. They're the bottom. Who cares? Let's take a break this week. That's totally possible. It's, ill-advised, but it's totally possible. But yeah. So Justice get a full cap. No surprise there. And then Titans attack. And to the bitter end, they're unable to find a solution. They're now trying to pick just random, like it almost feels like they're just like, okay, well, let's try this character. That didn't work. Let's try this character. That didn't work. They're just getting outdone by Justice, and they look insane. And the stats from this game are insane. Just look them up on Stratus and Corey, and then look at Guido as well, because in a turn of events, you had the guy who was already there. They picked up Sleepy, which then brings Sleepy into question, which I don't really want to go too deep into what I think about that situation. They brought him in. He's supposed to, him and Ark as a duo was kind of supposed to be a saving grace as they plan for the future. And then Guido's back in out of nowhere, and he's performing out of his mind. So maybe he just leveled up. Maybe this is where he has a better, he's better attributed, because Sleepy is known as his end player, where Guido does have more flexibility. So that makes sense. But yeah, he's been doing great, and allows Ark to shine. Ark's been looking very good on the Baptiste. Very good. That's another surprise. Me knowing him as a Mercy player mainly. But yeah, Justice with the 4-0 upset against Titans. So GG here. It's going to make next week exciting to see what happens next. And I can't wait, because all the discussions have been going on of, okay, well, with all these upsets against the top tier teams, does that just mean they're bad at roll lock? I don't know, right? We don't know yet. Let's give it 2 more weeks, and we can start talking about it as we move into playoffs to see when the dust settles, right? To see who makes it, and then see if, does this makes sense? Because like I said, Justice, they have no chance of making it. So all we get is these last few weeks of play, and then we have a whole off season. And some people are playing in Worlds on their respective teams. We have the whole off season to kind of speculate who's going to come in, because Rollock's going to be there. This is going to be the new, like I'm assuming all next year is going to be Rollock. Hopefully we don't end up in a big shift again. We need like another solid season of just straight play. But yeah, so that's it. That's it for this episode. So as usual, you can reach me at my email's the Birdwatchers podcast at gmail.com. I'm active on Twitter constantly at podcast TBW. That's at podcast TBW. And then on Reddit, the competitive Overwatch Reddit subreddit. I got it right this time. If you haven't joined. If you're not following. If you're not subscribe, whatever. I'm the Birdwatchers podcast. You'll see me posting on there. And then YouTube, like I said, if you listen to this currently on some other platform, if it's SoundCloud, if it's iTunes, but you have YouTube Premium, you want to listen there, there's a cool graphic that I have up there that plays while you play it in the background or whatever. You put that up on your TV. It's the Birdwatchers, and all the episodes get posted there as well, usually around the same time that the episode gets posted or close to that time. When it's announced. And then I'm on Facebook and Instagram. Those I'm not as active on. So the other options are the best way to get in contact. But that's been episode 54. That's stage 4, week 2. and we'll be back with episode 55 soon, where, we're going to talk about, we're not going to talk about Reign, right? Because they're not playing. So we get to focus on other teams as well. And we'll see if we might throw an extra game in there as we move into the end of the season, kind of give, a little more content as we move forward. We'll see how time permits. But as always, thank you for listening. Until next time, see ya.
I have destroyed more of your kind than I can count.
You weren't given those guns to toss them around like trash.
I don't take lessons from you.
Try not to get us killed out there.
I heard there's a nice reward for